Okay, the microphones are on. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. I'll begin with regrets from Councillor Zakora, who's not able to make it today, or at least not at the beginning. We're not sure. I also will express my own. My daughter, our second daughter, is in the hospital right now, and there may be a moment when Councillor Reid, who's acting mayor this month, takes over for me. Not sure how today will go, so we'll see. Okay with you?
You may take over for you on November 15th or now?
Acting mayor today. Just today. It's a temporary appointment.
Oh, okay.
I don't express such regret. Campaign fever. Okay, are there any items to be added to? Councillor Lohr.
I was advised that we have one other business item, the Suitcase project, review artifacts exhibit, raised by the chair of the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, Councillor Nicholson.
Okay, anybody else?
Thanks for reminding me, Chair.
Yeah, we should have brought your notes. Yeah. Okay, the agenda is amended. Okay, Ms. Lohr.
Thank you. First item is a delegation from Mr. Russ Black and others of Belkorp Environmental Services Incorporated regarding the cost benefits of waste management options for the region. I'll just ask the delegation to come up to the table.
Motion received.
Someone?
Very cozy.
Well, Your Worship and council members, thank you for the opportunity to present to you today.
Thank you. The microphone doesn't appear to be broadcasting to you, but it actually is to the back of the room, and it's mostly for the home audience. So,
got it.
Thank you.
As you know, we've been in front of council a few times now talking about our mixed waste material recovery facility that we're planning in the Tri-Cities area. We're in a fight to get that facility built. As of today, Metro Vancouver have not issued a license. It's been 8 months since we've applied for a license for that facility. And this morning they told us that they will wait till after the review process that was announced as part of the rejection of Bylaw 280 before they do issue us a license. So we're still... Yeah, 3 more months. So we're still fighting for the right to build this facility. And as part of that, I'd just like to point out that this council took the initiative of all member municipalities in Metro Vancouver to ask for a business case from Metro Vancouver. And I thought that was an excellent decision on council's part. And today what we'd like to do is show you a critique of that. With me today we have experts in the waste energy industry, a company called ICF International, 2 individuals that have a long pedigree in terms of looking at these types of facilities and negotiating power purchase agreements. So as sort of the foundation of us showing that this option, the mixed waste material recovery, is superior to incineration, we thought we'd start off with looking at the business case that Metro Vancouver presented to member municipalities. So I'm not going to speak much more. I'm going to turn the mic over to ICF and Seth Holkwater with ICF.
Thanks, Russ, and thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I'm Seth Holkwater. I led the team at ICF to put together this project and to do this review. ICF was engaged by Belkorp to do a comparison of the business case and to scrub the business case and scrutinize Metro Vancouver's analysis. We employed an approach exactly identical to what Metro Vancouver did. We made sure that we were able to replicate their results in our study, and we were able to nail exactly how they were doing it. Even though their model was a little obtuse, we were able to replicate that precisely. We're going to report the findings on an apples-to-apples basis. At times, Metro moves between talking about net present value and nominal dollars. I like to think of nominal dollars as the wallet dollars, what you have to actually reach into your pocket and pull out to pay for things over 35 years. So we're going to keep everything in terms of nominal dollars. over that 35-year operating period. So Metro has said that the incinerator price tag is going to be $1 billion. ICF took a look at that, and after we had modeled the Metro case and we were able to replicate the $1 billion, we actually, and we went through, we took a look at the myriad assumptions that Metro had used to get there, what the inflation rates were going to be, what different costs of materials might be, and we accepted probably 90% of the assumptions, but we found that some assumptions we couldn't quite accept, and other places we found some errors in calculations. And that by itself just changed the base case for us by an additional $178 million. And just to give you an example of some of the areas where we found discrepancies, when you're burning waste to energy, there's water in the fuel stream, in the waste. It's the water in the food waste. There's water in the paper goods, and before you can actually produce electricity out of it, you've got to heat it up enough to boil out that water first. And they didn't actually account for that energy loss, and that by itself was $55 million. Moving on, we took a look at what we consider good practice in the design of large capital projects, and that includes allowing a contingency for operations and maintenance, especially for a project that's going to run for 35 years. We went through the Metro report, and what we saw was that there was no contingency for O&M. So we applied a 15% contingency on these operation and maintenance costs, and that has the potential to increase the project's cost by $313 million. So adding that to the $178 million of errors that we had found previously, that already brings up the project's price to almost $1.5 billion. Separate from the O&M, one of the really heroic assumptions that Metro has made in their base case is the price of electricity that they're going to be able to receive from BC Hydro for the electricity that's produced at the plant. Metro has assumed that they will start at a price of $100 a megawatt hour, which is 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and that price will escalate by 1% a year for the entire 35 years of the contract. That really is, and that looks like a standard offer program contract, but it doesn't at the same time, because the standard offer program contracts are 20-year agreements, and they also fit for renewable energy projects. This is a 35-year project. Further, BC Hydro has shown that when the project pays off its debt service and its operating costs go down, that the electricity price goes down as well. And BC Hydro did that recently with the Burnaby project. So the Burnaby project drops down to $43 a megawatt hour. So if you think about it, the price starts at $100, it goes up for 15 years, then it drops down to $43 and continues to escalate from there. Metro didn't do that. What we did is we said if Metro were able to secure a contract under the SOP program, but the price dropped, that would increase the project's cost by $362 million. We further asked the question, what would happen if Metro were unable to secure any contract at all for power sales to BC Hydro, and instead had to sell the electricity out of the plant on the open market? And what we saw was that the open market is forecast to be priced at $29 a megawatt hour when this project goes into operation, and escalates over the 35 years to top out at about $60 a megawatt hour. So the end point is lower than the starting point that is in Metro's base case right now. When we take a look at that by itself is worth over $600 million. So just taking the errors and corrections that we had, plus not being able to secure an SOP contract at all, would mean that this project could cost $1.8 billion. We finally asked the question, what is a possible downside scenario? And this is not the most extreme scenario, but what if a few of these things happened all together? And in this case, what we looked at was the $178 million of corrections, the $628 million from not having the SOP contract. We also looked at the metals recovery rate. One of the assumptions that's built into Metro's report is that they will recover 100% of the ferrous and non-ferrous materials in the waste stream. That again is a heroic assumption. So we brought that down to 50%, and in that case that adds another $60 million because it's material it's revenue that's not coming into the project. There's capital cost uncertainty, which is that Metro used 3 projects that have been built in North America recently to help model its price forecast. 2 of those projects are adjacent to existing facilities, so they don't have some of the same cost uncertainties. They're able to share facilities with that. And based on that, we thought that it was reasonable to apply a 20% factor to this capital cost and capital cost uncertainty. That adds another $145 million. And then finally, the operating and maintenance cost contingency that I mentioned earlier, the 313. When we put all those pieces together, that shows us a reasonable downside scenario that could be $2.3 billion compared to Metro's original $1 billion. That really sums up the highlights of the ICF report. And I'd be happy to take, Duncan and I would be happy to take any questions that you might have.
I have a bit of trouble with the characterization of those as highlights. And so as you know, our council has taken some positions that were at least asking questions and trying to get better data, get better answers to the assumption kinds of questions of Metro. And I suspect you're going to have some around the table here again today, because we're still waiting on a lot of that stuff. We haven't jumped in with the support for the incinerator. In fact, some of us are set against it. Mm-hmm. But we do want to find the answers here. So I'm going to start here with Councillor Nicholson.
I'll go next.
Okay.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have a number of seemingly unrelated notes written down, but the mayor said we've been asking lots of questions. It's nice to begin to get some answers, and I'm hoping that we'll get hard copy of at least this and perhaps more than that from you at some point.
Absolutely. The report actually that we did is now available, I think, on Belkorp's website, and we have copies of the report.
And have next used us here.
Yep, there we go. Online, no wasted paper. nothing to feed the beast with.
Nothing to recycle. But
So you identified this work as being in nominal dollars rather than NPV, and that has the benefit of, at least within your report, being consistent. And I'm thinking that at the end of the day, probably having achieved consistency across the things we're trying to compare, we probably would then want to get to NPV, because if for example, next use were to go out and build a MRF in our municipality and we were going to pay on a yearly basis for what we send to it, then NPV will show our cost.
Absolutely.
And in comparison to your huge upfront costs, which we very much would appreciate.
Right. And the report also contains the NPV. For the sake of clarity during this presentation, we just stuck with nominal dollars.
Excellent. Okay. You talked about 15% overhead producing 313 million or billion, 3 million, I think, only million of additional cost. But that was on a $1 billion base, and I was kind of going, 15% of $1 billion isn't 313
No.
million.
So that's actually, so that 15% is applied to the to the O&M cost,
The operating costs.
just the operating costs
Ignoring the revenue.
over the years, right. What's tricky with this project is that because it has electricity revenue coming in, it sort of drives down the whole project cost over the life cycle. So you can't, you don't easily see the operating cost in the number, and so that's part of the challenge of presenting this and talking about this project is the upfront capital cost, the ongoing operating costs, and the ongoing revenues from metal sales and from electricity sales.
Okay, thanks. And last, I would just make a comment. You talked about the difference in cost, huge difference in cost that results from whether or not you have a deal with hydro.
Yes.
But when you identify the open market revenues available from the sale of energy as compared to the SOP or the $100
Right.
number, the comparison really is the spread is an amount that effectively I think will be paid by the residents of British Columbia.
Yes. So that's right. Either way,
Which
that
spreads it a little broader than Metro, but
right.
okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Of course, Councillor Nicholson's our rep on zero waste, and Councillor Reid joins me at the Metro Vancouver table, and she's on finance as well. So, Councillor Reid.
Well, that's the good part. Which makes me question everything that's going on now. One of the things I wanted to comment was the price, and I have to give credit to Mr. Dumont in one of our meetings a year ago when they were quoting the 103. That was a question. That's something that Mr. Dumont brought up, and we looked at it. So the mayor and I both questioned at Metro the 43 versus the 103, and they knew about it. I guess they just weren't going to bring it up. But what's more troubling to me is since then and following along, there are different, if it's not, hydro pays different prices to different people for electricity. And this really grates me because these run-of-the-river, the private industry ones, hydro seems to be giving them a good dollar for their electricity because they're calling it clean electricity, right?
That's my understanding.
Yeah, it's mine too, and that just stinks to me. So my problem is this right now, and we have followed this, and we have, I don't know that we could have done more to try and get this matter straightened out. But the one thing that I am concerned about, Russ, when you came in when we were approaching your project, you had said, because we questioned whether you would get approval from Metro. Obviously you haven't. And I'm wondering right now, Joe, I would think they would have to answer you. I don't think they can, the bylaw that's in place is the one that they would have to adhere to, I feel. And I don't know how they can just turn you down for another 3 months.
Yeah. I think, well said, Neil.
Well, I get that
think,
they can, but I'm saying
yeah.
to you, I didn't think that they could do that because the discussion that we had when you were here was that they could, you know, they actually have to react under the bylaw that's in place now, which is not 280.
Yeah, that was our understanding, that they have an obligation to, right now they only have statutory authority as per bylaw 181 and 183.
Right.
And our obligation to discharge that authority appropriately would be to act under that today and proceed with our license application. But for the first time, I received an email this morning that said they will not process my license application until such time as a decision has been made through this review process. So they have now absolutely linked. Before it was very fuzzy as to the link between bylaw 280 and my approval process. They never came out explicitly and said that. But as of this morning, it's the first time they've explicitly said it.
Well, that to me would be some kind of a legal challenge in my book. So that worked right into my next question because I've worked with Marvin Hunt for a long time. What, in your knowledge, that would you think that he is going to be able to come up with in the next 3 months is going to change the world?
Well, my understanding, based on the letter that Minister Polak sent to Metro Vancouver, is his scope is to look at how, with the rejection of Bylaw 280, can Metro achieve its waste diversion goals. So that's his scope. I haven't seen the specific term of reference around that, but I know that businesses are going to want to be participating in that through Chamber of Commerce and the Vancouver Board of Trade and all the other chambers of commerce that are affected by this bylaw. They will be making representations to that process to say that basically, we pay a large portion of this bill and we want sound, wise decisions made at the end of the day. So he's going to have to reconcile that. It no longer just is Metro Vancouver's determination of what they think is cost effective. I think the government, as well as this review process, is going to want to look at what truly makes sense for everyone who pays the bill, including residents, multifamily, and businesses.
So his job then basically is not going to be looking at some of the discrepancies that you found that should be addressed. It's strictly going to be flow control. That's what you think.
It's strictly waste diversion, which, the minister has already made her decision on flow control.
Right.
She wants to know, I believe, how that decision relates to Metro achieving its waste diversion goals.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm done.
Well, thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. It's been something this council, I was on the board when we approved the solid waste plan for the region, and we had our issues, Mayor Stewart and I at that time, in trying to raise issues at that time that weren't accepted. So I'm going to be interested to see what Metro's response is going to be to your report, because we've had questions on their financial analysis from the beginning of it. And we talk in with the 2% inflation rate. So we always talk in improvement project, talking today's dollars, right? And you're factoring in that increased value and inflation in future years' dollars into the price tag, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Which is fine, because that's nice to hear that, because a lot of times we get told, in today's dollars, here it is, but the cost is going to be substantially more down the long term.
Right.
I guess through to Russ and to you guys, I'd be interested in another portion of it. If your report is accurate and Metro agrees and accepts your report, where do we go with the tipping fee? The tipping fee was originally based on a operation of a facility costing, I think, $500 million, and the report under $1 billion. But if you're going to be over doubling that price, that would be something else. We need some more analysis, at least some analysis on that. How is Metro going to, if your report and Metro agrees, this may not, but I'm just saying that's a big thing for the region, is how are we going to pay for it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think our hope is that when other councils and decision makers at the board see the range of possible numbers here and the effect that will have on tipping fees, that the notion of a moratorium and a relook at the options is something that Metro is forced to do. That's ultimately where I think this should end up, and that is a re-look at the options and their true costs and what makes most sense in order to keep tipping fees in a reasonable range. Because as we know, as those tipping fees increase, you need to basically have ultimately tanks and machine guns at the border to keep the flow in the region. That's an exaggeration, but that's what, when you get those market distortions, you need to have more and more and more regulation in order to offset that distortion and keep the waste in the region. And the whole thing is just starting to spiral here from my perspective. And we need to get back in some rational thought around what the options are and what makes most sense for this region, including residents of municipalities as well as businesses that are in the region.
Well, we're here to represent the general public and their costs and their associations with all the operations they run, whether it be here in our municipality or through Metro Vancouver. And I think even if we were to keep it in 280, was allowed to keep it in the region, we were talking at one time $140 to $200 tipping fee, right? And that's going to be a substantial cost increase for local taxpayers. So I'd like to have that in your report, or something come back to us. I think it would be highlighted what the potential tipping fees would be. Even if 280 was to keep it in the region, and you didn't ship it out, it's still going to be. And that's where I think the people have to realize the options that you're providing at no cost to taxpayer, and what they're proposing in a more thorough, what I'd say. I'm very pleased with your report. I've looked through it. I saw your presentation. I think it takes in a lot of the assumptions that I think Neil and different ones on the board have been asking for a better business case on some assumptions that weren't in the report. And I'm realistic. And I think Neil and some others have been asking some very good questions and haven't been getting the answer. And I think this helps answer some of those questions. But I think at the general end of the day, what's the best deal for our public? I don't think this is. I've said it from the beginning. I think Neil said that from the beginning. And May said that on the board. She's been strong along with Richard on that, right? So, but that would be helpful and get that out there, because I think the public has to understand if they're going this way, this is what it potentially cost you down the line. That's going to put the pressure on them to change the public minds about that. Okay?
Yep, agreed.
Thank you.
Yep. No, I had Councillor O'Neill, but he then put his hand up after Councillor Zerrillo as well. So I'll go to Councillor Zerrillo. Oh, you didn't? Okay.
So I had a couple of questions. The first one was on Friday and Monday this week, both I was involved in two different workshops in relation to the BC government's campaign to look at natural resources in the province. And are they including garbage as one of our natural resources? Is it on the table? Are there discussions about garbage being a natural resource now or in the future?
Under the Clean Energy Act, the definition of clean renewable energy is that which is void of fossil fuel anything in it. So that, to me, is pretty clear in the Clean Energy Act. However, BC Hydro's Integrated Resource Plan is a little murky with respect to that, because they do include the definition of a biomass being MSW, which would include the fossil fuel fraction of it. So we're asking for some clarity around that. It was one of the prime reasons why we challenged through the BCUC the contract that they were about to sign on the existing waste energy facility. We challenged that because we did not like the definition of MSW, which contains about 50% of it is fossil fuel based. So we said, how could that possibly be a clean, green, renewable energy? So I think there's some clarity required at the provincial government level to make sure that their statutes, their policies, and approved plans are all lined up appropriately in that regard. So it's something that we are pushing for in terms of clarity.
Well, it would be good just to keep the city in the know about that, because I know the workshop we were at today, we were talking about how does the municipality work alongside, assist, get involved in this in the natural resource economy. That's going to be the economic engine of BC. So it'd be great to keep that in. Keep in the know about that.
And what I see as the economic engine of BC is keeping recyclables in the loop as opposed to burning them. When you burn that material, the paper and plastic is 75% of the fuel requirement for a waste energy facility. When you burn it, it's lost, and you have to go back and mine, etc., to reproduce those products. So I think there's a big opportunity to create, what's the circular economy that Metro Vancouver always talk about in their green energy forums. I think this is a perfect opportunity to do that. Why burn and destruct those resources? Why not keep them in the loop? It's a real fundamental question. It's when you go to the Zero Waste Conference that Metro puts on, it's the elephant in the room always, at all the last 4 events that they've held.
Well, I see you've got quite a reasonable sized delegation here today, so I'm sure there's been lots of pre-discussion about what was the objective of coming today? What was the best case scenario outcome when you thought about presenting to the council today? Like I'm thinking you're looking for an action outside of just making a presentation. So what was the objective?
Yeah, for us, for next use, we wanted to legitimize what Coquitlam were asking of Metro. There was a good question that Coquitlam asked. I did not think the response was a good response. So primarily, we wanted to undertake this study to, one, show that these questions are legitimate questions for municipalities to be asking of Metro. And number 2, again, it shows that there's a much better option. So the option that you've unanimously supported is the right approach. Taking a last pass at getting those recyclables out of the waste stream before they either go to an incinerator or to a landfill. So really here to support the positions that Coquitlam have taken and to provide information that shows that you're on the right track, and that we very much as a company appreciate that and appreciate your support.
Well, I'm wondering as a council if there's any way, or if we're opposed to the idea of just sending a letter to Metro about this license, and to ask them to consider the license on its own merit outside of this association with Bylaw 280, because I think it's always been their position that it wasn't related, and is there any appetite here? Is anyone opposed to the idea of just asking it to be considered in its own merit? Because we have the opportunity to bring up to 80 jobs, some of them, as you were saying, for people with disabilities as well, that you're looking at that, and I'm wondering if we could do that. Further discussion.
I mean, it's how the council feels about it. At the staff level, I did that. It wasn't particularly well received at the staff level. It's now at the council level, so whatever you feel comfortable doing would be appropriate.
Yeah, and it'll be for further discussion, right? We'll stick with the delegation now, but in fact, the reps have done that, and we've all been doing that at Metro to try to get an answer on what we thought was a pretty simple application that was consistent with every element of the solid waste, or the principles, every principle of the Metro's way of addressing zero waste was not to make it zero by spewing it up into the sky, but make it zero by reusing as much of it as we possibly could. So we'll have a discussion about that in a bit. I've got one more on the speakers list.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, just a couple questions here. So this is the first time the public has seen this report. I see it's dated the 24th. And so this is new news for everybody, including Metro, I would guess. Have you presented it to Metro? Do you have plans to present it directly to Metro other than a courier or mail? Is there some sort of committee are you going to go to?
We are sending a letter to Metro with the report. To be frank, it's not well received when we challenge any notion of the legitimacy of a waste energy facility at the Zero Waste Committee of Metro or at the board. We're not well received there, and it's difficult to have a fulsome, objective discussion in that form.
So you've actually made presentations to the board directly? You said it's not received by the board.
Well, we have written letters to the board when we were going through the Bylaw 280 process, and we're asking Metro to abide by their existing Bylaw 181, which allows for mixed waste material recovery facilities and not impose these new requirements in Bylaw 280 on us. They basically shot that down. They did not respond to 3 of our letters, and ultimately did respond, but in a very critical way, which it's just not helpful to having an open dialogue.
And are you planning to present this to other councils as well? Or is this the only council that's getting this one-on-one presentation here?
Yeah, we've presented to Port Moody as well as to Port Coquitlam. Yes, not this report, but we generally start here and then we work our way around the region. But we do intend to go to other councils and make similar presentations.
So one of the things would be an attempt by you to influence the 2 people on council who are on the board of Metro Vancouver. Is this part of what you're attempting? Because we can send a letter, but we actually have 2 people with votes on. Is this what you're trying to do as well? Influence them with your presentation because you can't get through to the board as a whole. You're trying to influence them here.
In the context of what we see developing, that is, we have now Maple Ridge, Pitt Meadows, Coquitlam, and Port Moody. There are 4 municipalities that make up Metro Vancouver board that now are asking for a moratorium and a second look at things. We're hoping that gains more momentum, that other municipalities join in and are asking the same thing, that a moratorium be put on. I think Metro are probably closely approaching $20 million in expenditure on the development of this incineration project. So stepping back and putting a moratorium on that and asking for a relook and a rethink of their solid waste management plan, I think would be appropriate. That's what we're really hoping for, and we're hoping that we get some momentum with respect to that.
Okay, good, thank you. And I just want to make a quick comment. We talked about various natural resources, including garbage and natural resource, and I guess you could say that it is. I was thinking that of all the complexity that this subject presents, and the sophistication of your earlier proposal for the MRF, which Councilor Zarella said would create up to 80 jobs and millions of dollars in investment, and I was thinking that, well, actually, human ingenuity is probably our greatest natural resource that we have. Mm-hmm. And as long as we can continue tapping into that natural resource to solve our problems without being held up by preconceived notions down at Metro Vancouver, I think then we'll be doing a lot better. So, I think what the MRF is a tremendous response to the situation that's facing us here. And I hope Metro Vancouver comes to that decision as well. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll differ a little bit on the word natural. I'm not sure that solid waste could be considered a natural resource, but it certainly is a resource that lots of communities use, and I think that's what we're wrestling with right now. I don't think any of us want to see it shipped to the United States. We just we have trouble with the economics and a whole bunch of environmental issues related to creating a landfill that's up above us rather than below us. Seeing none others, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go to Vancouver next.
We're crazy to go to Vancouver.
No, there's some supporters there. That's where I'd be going.
The sea was in zero waste.
Well, what?
On the zero waste committee.
Bad boys may be gone.
2 reps.
I think I'm going to be sent to Africa to study some disease. That's where they'll have me.
Okay,
Yeah.
Madam Clerk.
Next item are minutes of the council and committee meeting held Monday, October 20th. The recommendation is that the
So
committee
moved.
approve.
Second.
Councilor Rasmussen, Councilor Hodge, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Moving on to reports of staff. Our first report is regarding the middle school walk bike ability program phase 1. Recommendation is that the committee receive the report for information.
So moved.
Second.
So, after Jerry.
Councilor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. Just part of the discussion on this, something that Councillor Hodge and I were informed about last week at the school board city liaison committee meeting, and I think this just it kind of complements what's going on here. Is that Devin Ross, the I think assistant facilities manager for the district, announced that she's developed some sort of the board has developed some sort of new information portal that allows principals of schools throughout the school district 43 to share information about how they're solving their traffic problems in and around schools. And so I immediately thought of that when I thought of this, because it's all good and well to have kids walking and biking to school in the morning, but if there's traffic chaos around there because of the loss of school buses, bringing people in, more people driving their kids to school and things like that, then it's kind of a step back, one step forward, one step back. So I was really pleased to see that Ms. Ross and the district have developed this, which I think is going to have quite a positive impact in dealing with sort of problems we've discussed around this table for the 3 years that I've been on council, is that the traffic mess that can often happen around schools. So they're going to be sharing information, sharing best practices, and I think it's a real step forward for the school district and for the population, school-going population and parents in our city. I don't know if there's anything that Councillor Hodge wants to add to the recollects from that discussion, but Is that about how
I think
you
we
recall?
covered it, yeah.
Okay, good.
I
And-
thought the same thing.
Good. So I wonder, are you guys aware of that? And if not, maybe you should you might want to get in touch with Ms. Ross and find out how that can work with this program here.
Through the chair. Yes, the staff are very aware of the portal program that the school district has formed. It will be a tool and a resource for the internal tool to the school district 43 administrators, the principals. It involves contact information for all of the municipalities across the Tri-Cities, ICBC information, Travel Smart, contact information to work with some of the folks that are actually involved in this program. So I was in attendance at the meeting last week and have been corresponding with Ms. Ross actually through the formation of this program so that we would be coordinating it with the school district administration folks as the lead. And Ms. Ross will play a role in that process. So she was directly involved in the schools that will be selected this year. They were very aware and wanted to be involved in that.
We just want to keep that liaison, the liaising happening. Thank you very much. Let's hear for liaising.
Yes. Yay.
Here. Reed, Stewart, Asmundson, Wilson.
Okay, Reed wants to talk about liaising. We have, there was a question, and I can't remember from where or who, but at the first all candidates meeting about stuff like this, or it was brought up. This is a real concern to a lot of people. It's different when my kids went to school. You sort of push them out the door with their lunch kit and hope they came back, or maybe some days not so much. But they came back and, life was good. Now people feel that it's just unsafe for, I guess, a lot of their own reasons. So instead of creating a lot of angst in the next 3 weeks, is there any way, this is public, that we can get this out to all the candidates, liaise somehow, put something on, let them know that there's no need to ask about this, it's underway and what you've done, because I think it's a really good program, and it's good and fair information for everyone to have.
So like a media brief, would you like us to work with communications on that?
I don't know, I'll leave that to Terry as our media genius. I don't know how. I just think instead of creating a lot of angst for people in not knowing that there is something actively moving along, that it's fair to everyone to let them know what we have done. So I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, me. So I hearken back to the days actually in this committee meeting about 2007, and Councillor Asmundson was chair of the Transportation Committee, and I had appeared not as a member of council, but as the DPAC president, and we had just completed, or were in the middle of completing a survey of parents and administrators and teachers and students and everybody, about 700 respondents to a survey on traffic safety around schools, and presented the results and began the process of trying to address some of the challenges. We presented it to the school district as well, but I understand their challenges. They don't have the money to spend outside the classroom, and a great many of the issues were on school property, but a great many of them were not. They were on city property, and we've gone a long way to addressing the walkability approaching the school. But back then, and I've said it often, one of the big challenges was the other parents. We often said that parents did not agree that too many parents drove their kids to school. They did, however, agree that too many other parents drove their kids to school, and all kinds of, and that was, our schools weren't designed for that. My wife teaches at Panorama. It now has 300 cars morning and evening picking up their students, dropping off and picking up students in a drop-off area that is designed for about 40 cars. They have inadequate parking to begin with, and then they've used up some of the parking to add portable classrooms. So now we're left with no drop-off pickup to speak of on a school, and lineups that go down about 2 blocks down the road beginning at 2:15 in the afternoon and stretching all the way in so right now there'll be about 150 cars lined up to pick up the children at Panorama, and that exists at lots of schools. There's some things that we won't be able to address, but we have been doing this for a number of years, and I'm encouraged to see us moving into middle schools because this has been 6 years of the elementary school program. I'd love to see us accelerate this. Our next speaker is Councillor Asmussen.
Sorry. I guess taking on what Mayor Stewart said, this is the first stage, but this is the second stage. Our first stage was the elementary schools. The second stage, here's the middles, and we'll be looking at the third stage, probably in the high schools eventually. So that's the direction we've been taking about this. I want to, from our elementary schools to this, is there a way for us to track success? You know, I don't see it in the report. I don't know how that's going to happen, but how are we knowing, by making these improvements, just for making it safer, but are we getting any more people walking or biking to school?
Through the chair. When the elementary school program was done, well, there's 27 schools as part of the elementary school program, so it was fairly focused on looking at short, medium sort of operational improvements and some sidewalk construction. But there was a piece of work done at that time that looked at 3 elementary schools, and what they did was a little bit of before and after. And so when the program started, the 3 schools in question at that time were Bramble, Miller Park, and Pine Tree Way Elementary School. And the pilot program for the elementary schools did what they call a hands up survey. And so they went in before some of these programs were done. They did hands up surveys to find out how the kids actually traveled to school. So it's done in a very simple way. You just go into the classroom as a facilitator. As part of the middle school program, you'll notice that TransLink Travel Smart staff will be doing that. They're going into these 8 middle schools. They'll be doing these types of before and after surveys because we also all want to know, too, the benefit of doing this type of work. So to get back to the elementary school and the 3 schools that were surveyed, it's just a sample, but it kind of gives you a bit of an indication. They had a walk to school Wednesday, for example, in Bramble Elementary School. And the results of driving to school before it started was around 57%. So it's not 100% of the kids being driven, but about 57. And on the walk to school, the walk to school portion went up significantly. They went up to around 76%. So, and that's just the one example of one school, but there were 3 schools done in this program. So there is a real potential to see mode shift, but some of the challenges around these schools are that the children are only in them for a short period of time. So elementary, obviously 5 years, middle school is 3. But you introduce and you educate. The parents were also involved. They use student leaders as within this, and so they'll work with the students in the school to promote the idea. It's education with the kids that are directly involved, and they take that message home. So in answer to you, yes, I think there'll be pieces around following up and tracking, are we seeing those mode shifts in place?
It would be good to have that on an ongoing basis, going back to the elementary, because of the changing population of people going through the schools, to see if it's staying, increasing, or decreasing with new people coming in and out. And when we get into the middle schools, so I think council, when we get these updates in the report, needs to know where we're at with its success, how it's being achieved. Because I really think while we can create safer connectivity and areas, I think the mayor pointed out the biggest thing is the education of the parents and the people driving to and from there and their behavior in and out of the schools and how they drive in and out there. I mean, I see that I drive for transit, I'm in and out of the schools, and some of my biggest problems aren't the kids, it's the parents and their actions dropping off the kids and how they're speeding in or parking in crosswalks or whatever and not paying attention to the issues in a school area. So we'll do our part, but we need to track the success and we need to be able to track hopefully the change in behaviors in the area. I think that would be interesting to see what the behavior of, other than just the counts of cars. We can count the cars that come in this period of time, count the cars that are coming in at the end of the year, a successful program, but can we also analyze and have people from Travel Smart analyze if there's a change in behavior? That would be neat to know. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, thank you for taking over during my interruption. The question I was getting to was related to something that Councillor Asmussen was just talking about, though, and that is how do we, having done these improvements, having made improvements in some, for example, in Mundy Elementary, where my daughter went to, there we did a curb extension, but we got complaints from parents saying you took up one of our parking spaces. What they meant was you took up the no stopping zone where we used to stop and we used to park because it was just a no stopping zone and we couldn't enforce quickly enough, so they would park there. The letter to the editor 3 weeks ago or something about Centennial, where the parent parked in the no stopping zone on the approach to a crosswalk, making it so that the kids could not be seen as they entered the crosswalk. They could only be seen as they stepped onto the line of travel. How do we educate? Can we, having made the improvements, can we put develop a signage program that explains to parents what the purpose of the no stopping zone is, to make it so that the no stopping zone, to make it so that students are visible as they enter the crosswalk? We certainly heard during the letter to the editor thing a couple of rebuttals from parents that said, you know, you parked in a no stopping zone and you got a ticket, wah. But how do we get parents to understand that better? We know school administrators are facing the same challenges where they knock on the windows and try to get them to move on. It's a very inefficient method. That's not a parking space. So if we haven't been able to do the curb extension, how do we educate?
Spike belts.
Spike belts.
Oh, a big hot pink sign that says expensive spot.
A couple of responses to that. I think there's two ways to approach that. There's probably many ways, but a couple of ways that come to mind are, one of them is through the students themselves. I think that the education of students and having them take that message up to their parents is it's a very beneficial way of approaching. Early on with all the recycling initiatives that were underway, those messages were sent home with students, and now it's all very mainstream. This is very similar to that, is to have some of the message. So my response would be through the students themselves, and we can talk to Travel Smart around getting some of those key messages out that explain why we've done certain traffic operational safety improvements around schools. And so, they may see these types of improvements around their middle schools as well as time goes on. So one is through the students. And the second one is that we can work with Travel Smart to either have information on the web as well as information that's available to parents. And that could be through a brochure or a leaflet that's maybe put on windows. There's different, like the driver window, where you can put it on a car. I wouldn't recommend additional signs in and around, partly because it's actually, you want to really maintain sight lines in these areas, and so any type of signs, extra signs, can form a visual distraction, and that's something that we want to really manage to make sure they're very safe zones. So I caution around signs, but certainly information going home through students and aimed at parents is a good way to do that.
And I would also I suggested it a couple of years ago, and I'd like to see if we could move it forward, a program where we provide the schools with some kind of a common messaging, perhaps even drawn by children, that says what that space is for, so that parent volunteers or administrators can give it to parents just the day before they get the ticket, because we have to do more enforcement. We see people doing U-turns in front of schools across crosswalks so that they can drop their child safely off next to in the no stopping zone. It's safe for their children, but it's not safe for everybody else. I'll stop there. You're done, Brent, so Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. My question was exactly what Councillor Asmussen asked, but I'll ask another one about that. But before I do, I've talked to a lot of schools, and they've told me that they are constantly educating their parents, and so I don't know if it's from a lack of education. I think it's just that parents are thinking that their one time won't make a difference, right? And I think it's enforcement. I think we have to provide more enforcement in those school zones. If we're truly concerned about the safety of kids, there has to be enforcement. You had mentioned 27 elementary schools, and out of those 27, 3 were sort of asked, how many of you are walking to school, how many are riding right now, and then you mentioned the increase from 59% to 76.
About 76.
6%. Was that on the Walking Wednesday of the increase?
That was on the, there were two pieces done on the day that they actually had. The counts were done in a couple of different ways. The first one was on the walk to school event. The walk mode went up significantly, but they also did follow-up random counts on days subsequent to that, and in those times, the reduction in vehicle trips ranged between about 20 and 50%. So it wasn't just the one-time event on the walk to school day. At these particular schools where this was measured, they did see a change in the travel behavior afterwards, based on this program that happened at these 3 schools. So it was a pilot, and it's worthy of doing, and so we're going to focus it at the middle school level this go-around. But certainly if there's appetite from council to expand this type of work to other elementary schools, then we would just need direction in that regard.
Well, I think it's great that we're doing this, and intuitively it makes a ton of sense, but I think we need to try to track it a little more closely to make sure that it's achieving the goals that we have set, right? So I hope that we track the middle schools really closely and just make sure that this is having the impact that we're hoping it has. Do we have any the tracking that was done on those 3 schools? Do you know how long they tracked it for, like the rest of that year or into the following year, do you know, or?
Yeah, the length of the program was just within 1 school year, so it wasn't because there wasn't a lot of funding for it. It was just a small pilot project to see. This was going back to 2010, so it was work actually done just before I got here.
Right.
And so the piece around this type of education, if as said, if we want to do more tracking around this, then we will need to set it up, and we will do that for the middle schools. Now that we've had this conversation, I'll talk a little bit more closely with that to TransLink Travel Smart folk. With respect to the elementary school, if we were wanting to capture data, we would have to go out and start collecting sort of now and then trend up, and how we manage that could be, we'd be looking for lowest cost ways of doing that. But there would be a cost aspect to it, especially 27 schools. That's a lot of schools to
well, it's hard
actually
to tell
track.
now, though, because the changes have already been made on those 27 schools, right? So we don't have the baseline
Correct.
to start with.
Yeah.
So I'm saying with the middle schools,
We will.
We're spending a lot of money. We need to make sure that the money is being spent wisely.
So we are collecting baseline surveys at all 8 of those middle schools.
That's great. Do we have any idea of how pedestrian type incidents? So maybe I don't know what gets reported, but obviously a child getting hit would get reported. But near misses and that sort of thing, I'm assuming they don't get reported. But do we have any ideas of whether these safety improvements have made a difference that way?
Not explicitly through the data. Again, what we're getting is when we're involved with schools, particularly our traffic operational folks, they will get recorded. Get Dan to come up. We will hear of incidents of almost misses. And so working with the principals and the schools themselves, we'll have a good feel of what those measures are. So I'm just going to pass this over to Dan, who's been involved with the schools elementary school program.
Hoping it was actually an almost hit, that it wasn't this.
I would capture it this way. Excuse me. The number of expressions of concerns that we get are much more focused now. We're able to go into an elementary school that has a parent advisory committee or a principal that's expressed a concern. We're able to walk in with the walkability program that was done in concert with them. Now, because of the turnover at an elementary school, quite often we're dealing with a new group of similarly concerned parents, but they're able to see that history of what the previous PAC had expressed, what the previous principal in many cases, because the administrators change quite frequently as well. So it gives us a bit of a benchmark to talk about what the issues were, how they were addressed, and it gives them a lot of comfort. I think a lot of the residual concerns that are being expressed are behavioral. We've addressed the signage issues, we've addressed the vegetation, we've addressed, in many cases just recently, the infrastructure issues of sidewalks. I think in no small part that played a role in the school district's interest in creating this new task force and a resource tool in their portal to help those principals to deal with more of the human nature behavioral type issues that are an ongoing challenge. But I think from while we don't have statistics on crashes and we don't get data on near misses, I would say that the numbers and the quality of the complaints has greatly been improved, and we've been able to address them much better with the historical background of the elementary school walkability and the improvements that we've made. That's then focused on the behavioral side, which they're trying to address through this resource kit that they can go through to the parents. So while not having numbers for you, anecdotally, I think the program has been quite successful at the elementary school program. I think we'll be able to measure it more better in the middle school because of the structure, the way we've set up the process. We've now learned some best practices, and it's a much smaller group from 27 down to 8.
Thanks. And last question, do we know if Lee Elementary was one of the 27 schools?
All 27 schools, so every school within the city of Coquitlam. Now, there were other elementary schools outside of Coquitlam that were not done, and we talked a bit about at the workshop that we had with the liaison group. So some of the elementary schools that are within School District 43, Port Moody or in Port Coquitlam, weren't covered, but they're aware of the process and the methodology that we used.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so a little bit about the elementary school program first, because I see in this report, the first line says, upon the successful completion of the elementary school walkability program. I think we've done some good work there, but as I said, I think that this program is a combination of education and improvements. That's some of the improvements that we did in terms of bulges, and I know we've been working on sidewalks near some of our elementary schools. But because that part of this is also education, we have new groups of kids coming in all the time. Education also means changes in behavior, and sometimes changes in behavior require enforcement to do that. So I guess my main concern is that we don't see a letdown in the gains or lose any of the gains that we've made in the elementary school area. Some schools, we still have a lot of work to do there. And I'm thinking one of the ones that comes to mind is Pine Tree Elementary. You know, by talking to residents in that area, that that's almost like its own traffic jam in around there at 3 o'clock, where I know the parents say they either get out of their house by 20 to 3 or they don't come home because it's still a problem in there. So we still have some problem areas in some of these elementary schools, and not just from a traffic standpoint. Where there's traffic, there's safety issues in those neighborhoods, and clearly there are a lot of areas where the walk to school and some of the other programs have not been embraced, either because of terrain or other things there. Moving now, fast forwarding to the middle schools, I think the middle schools present us some other challenges, because with the middle schools, they tend to be larger in enrollments, and they also draw from greater distances. So rather than being a neighborhood catchment, they can be a very large catchment area. And I think when that catchment area expands, that just increases the potential for other forms of transportation, so cars and everything else. So it's easier within elementary school because you can promote walkability. Sometimes that's tougher in the middle schools, even though the kids are older. And the second point I wanted to talk about, is you touched on it, is when we get to the middle schools, because the catchment area expands, quite often it expands cross municipal borders. And so I am concerned about how we encourage the walkability programs in areas where it may be our residents going to schools that are in Port Coquitlam or Port Moody, and vice versa. Certainly with the Burke Mountain, there's no middle school, so the only options are to go to Minnetonka and Quay, and of course those are schools that are in Port Coquitlam. The other challenge, of course, is Maple Creek, where a lot of people from the River Springs area cut through and use a school that's in Port Coquitlam. So I think that, knowing that the school board is now taking some steps to address this, I think we have the opportunities to work with them. But I also think that we have to sort of be working with our counterparts at the other cities to make sure that these programs work in schools, in areas where there's that cross-city catchment.
So we do agree, but so we have the eight schools that are actually in Coquitlam are the ones that we will be focusing on. So we would not be able to address the schools that are in Port Coquitlam or Port Moody. But that being said, we can certainly follow up with our counterparts there and make sure that they're aware. For example, Travel Smart is also partnered with the city of Port Coquitlam, and so there is a bit of an opportunity there for them to have a conversation around this element. So we're hoping to get going in this year. Where actually meetings are scheduled fairly quickly because it was in last year's budget, but we can certainly advance council's wishes in that regard.
And certainly, I see the potential for partnership, particularly on the education side and that type of thing. And I've already heard from a couple of councillors in Port Coquitlam about the increase in traffic around their schools from Coquitlam residents, and I said, well, this is certainly an opportunity to work together to try to alleviate those issues. And I just want to make sure that at the staff level and at the education level, particularly, that we are working with those other schools other than the 8 that fall within our borders, to recognize that there are residents attending those schools. We want to make sure that they're safe when they cross over into the Port Coquitlam borders, and make sure that we're sort of working together. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank you, Catherine, for your comments on educating through the kids. I think that's absolutely, we need to keep doing it. And maybe it's going to take 5 years, maybe it's going to take 10, but absolutely, it's like you said on the recycling, it's going to start with low pickup, but over time. So thank you for those comments. I just wanted to ask for some clarification around the facts here on the financial implications. So the first phase, it looks like the cost for the city was $61,600. This on phase 2, we don't know what the costs are yet.
Correct.
And we don't know if we have a partner yet.
We are partnered with Travel Smart already on this.
Okay.
Other partners would be people like ICBC. And so we need to know what the needs are for each of the 8 schools. And we'll get the needs for 4 of those schools within the next few months.
Okay.
And then we'll go to ICBC and we'll talk to them with their road safety program to see if any of those would qualify for cost sharing with ICBC. We also can go to TransLink through some of their other programs with respect to other types of improvements, whether they're cycle related or whether they're, if it's near a bus stop, for example, there's still funding available under certain programs to improve sidewalks near bus stops. So we'll use whatever mechanism we can to offset any city costs on infrastructure that would be on our streets and roads.
And will it come back to council then to approve that budget when it? Great. So that was that. The other thing I wanted to mention was it's wonderful that we have the reports and the improvements, and I agree with it would be nice to have had some, was it successful before we move into the second phase, but I did want to highlight the enforcement. It tends to be a few offenders. It tends to be the same, group. It's like anything, right? 80% of the problem is 20% of, in this case, the drivers. So by law enforcement, we really need to do it. I mean, I'm there for the last 4 years. I'm there 5 days a week, most of them after schools and mornings, and you can see who it is. And now I'm at a new school in 5th year, middle school. You can see who it is. You know who it is, and it creates this animosity. It creates this. As soon as you get into the school zone, you see that person again there where they shouldn't be. And enforcement, it has to be enforcement, and we need more. So I mean, I see we spent $61,600. I'd like to know if we spent $61,600 on enforcement, would we be farther ahead than spending $61,600 on this study and the improvements? And
it's about $7,700 per school, the city's contribution to that. I think that the new portal that is going to be, that is online now and available to the principals can help in a couple of ways. They do have contact information now that takes them to the Tri-Cities Speed Watch programs that are available. So there is a lot more information available to the school administrators, who are the ones that see those 20% that cause problems for the others. And so there's RCMP contact information, I believe, in there. So if it's a moving violation, like if it's it is RCMP, it's not our city bylaw forces. We're not able to enforce moving infractions.
so I just want to put that out there because I've Dan, since I've been on council, I've emailed the traffic watch. I've tried to get traffic. There's not enough resources. We do not have enough resources in the city to address the problem properly. And I'm just wondering if the money is better spent on the resources or on the engineering. That's all I'm saying, because it's a behavior change that we need. Thank you so much.
It was actually a fundamental decision of council 5 years ago and recommended that engineering solutions are quite often much longer payoffs, and they have a much better payoff than having a cop standing there all the time. Our challenge with the ICBC funding, and I've been to ICBC's road safety program, as you have, and the answer we always seem to get is these are really low incidence areas. There's not that many incidents. A child gets injured very seldom in a school zone, and therefore ICBC is not looking at those ones. They're looking at major intersections where there's lots of accidents. And we've made the argument that okay, but it may be low incidence, but it's a really big impact when it happens. And so could we not adjust that? And Kathleen Adler has taken that issue on and tried to go to bat, and I hope that we found solutions that would allow the low incidence areas some investments, because it's relatively small investments as well in order to prevent or improve the safety in those areas. And on this amount, there's two issues I've got on the financial implications and on the order of schools. Now that the decision has been made by the provincial government to replace Banting, does that adjust our schedule? Because Banting doing walkability toward the old school a couple of years before they built a new school, or actually built a new school relatively quickly, should we not wait until the design is done on that, and therefore readjust the schedule? And I would like to see us potentially invest more in it. Obviously have to go to the budget process in order to do that, but invest more to go back and make sure that we've got everything, done everything we can from engineering and even from an enforcement point of view at these school sites.
I just want to touch base on Banting. So I am fully aware of the replacement at Banting School, and this was actually one of the ones that the school district wanted to see us work forward on or move forward into the first year. Part of it is that when you do replace a school on site, similar to what's going on with Centennial right now, if there's ways to reduce some of those car trips to this area because there happens to be a viable alternative nearby that perhaps the parents weren't aware of or just wasn't realizing that it's a fairly easy adaptation, that would be the best thing, is to reduce the number of vehicle trips at this school in advance of all this construction coming. So there's a bit of an opportunity actually to work with the students and the parents at this school, because the school site will be continue to be used over the next few years during the replacement school process.
Okay, so consideration we did. Anybody else?
It's been moved and seconded.
Thank you.
Yes. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimous.
Next report is regarding the city's wayfinding plan update. Recommendations that the committee receive the report for information.
So moved. Yeah, I'm glad our tourism manager is here, Eric. as part of wayfinding, this all deals with internal wayfinding, and I was thinking that we should also be looking to help people find their way to Coquitlam, especially from the airport, from the border, from the ferry terminal. There's so many different ways, and I'm just thinking if there are thoughts of getting that into our next tourism guide, details like that, or other ways online that we have. Here are the preferred routes. This route works best in the morning, this in the afternoon, because, or anything like that. Have you done any thinking that way?
Yeah, through the chair, definitely. The travel guide, next edition that will be coming out in the spring, we did think of the larger map picture when people are coming in. Excuse me. And that's printed. Obviously, online is where much of an opportunity comes from to get creative with ideas and suggestions. And then the other way is we've had a few meetings with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure on highway signage, Highway 1, Highway 7, closer by, but spreading it out a bit too to assist with driving people closer to into the city, off those major thoroughfares when they get off a ferry, or if they're leaving here to get to a ferry directional. Because you're right, once they're here, a lot of the GPS will guide them, but when they're doing 120 down the highway, it's those initial signs that'll get them here.
Good. Thank you very much. That's all. Good. Glad you're thinking that.
Anybody else?
Oh, I did. Hunter?
I had one.
I just wanted to ask the question on the next steps about the consultant. Just a question for Pete. Do we have expertise in-house that could do this? Because I can see this as being a bit of an ongoing, I mean, we're just coming into now our tourism plan. We have the Evergreen Line coming. I can see this being a longer-term initiative, and I'm just wondering if we have expertise in-house instead of going out for a consultant that could maybe follow this along over the next 5 years.
From my perspective, it's more of an issue about workload than it is expertise. I am very proud of our staff, and I believe we have a very high level of expertise, but there are many more priorities on our work plan than we can get through with the resources we have. And so for special one-off projects, sometimes it makes more sense to bring somebody in for it, especially with specialized. That would be my generic comment. With respect to the specifics, I would ask Joseph or Catherine.
A consultant in this case can provide very useful information around particularly the supply of things that sort of relate to street furniture, like kiosks. We're very capable of developing signs that are your typical standard signs in-house, and there's lots of best practices guidelines around that. But when it comes to actually having pedestrian level signage and kiosks and the types of equipment, and you'll see them in various communities, whether you're in downtown Vancouver or if you're in Steveston or UBC, and there's a variety of suppliers out there. So having a consultant allows us to zoom in on that expertise that can provide us really good information for suppliers and try and be most cost efficient. I think it's around being the most efficient use of time and finding sort of the best, latest information on suppliers and technology that can help advance this. There's a whole variety of information that's out there, and as I say, having the least amount of time to get it in place for the Evergreen Line. We only have about a year until Evergreen Line opens, and the focus of the first phase, as noted in the report, would be to focus the facilities along the Evergreen Line corridor.
I'm just wondering if there's a way even to shadow then somebody internally, because I'm just seeing that this is going to be something that's going to grow in importance in the city, and it would be great to have some knowledge in-house and not have it come in and out and in and out.
From the engineering perspective, the most important step is really to set proper foundation for the program, which starts always with reviewing the existing information in forms of standards, guidelines, and best practices. We do have the capability in-house to do a quick review and establish some draft guidelines for ourselves, and with a common sense approach we can relatively easily zero down what should guide our program for the upcoming years. When it becomes more interesting is really the design and then the implementation phase. There's quite a bit of science behind designing signs, and that comes not only from the purpose of the signs, but they look at things like the size of the sign, the color schemes, and it all depends on who the target audience is for specific signs, what is the speed of those driving or cycling or walking towards the signs who need the particular information to find a way where they want to go. The real jungle is, though, when it comes to making the signs, and that's where certainly we will need quite a bit of external help, because if you are not careful enough, you end up with something what you don't necessarily want at an enormous cost.
Like dogs and Spirit Square sign? Thank you.
Thanks. I love the idea of the interdepartmental team. I think that's great. I'm just hoping that some on that team are regular transit users and cyclists, so that they look at it from that lens.
Thank you very much. Very unanimously. That's it.
Oh, yes, the Suitcase project.
Oh, yes.
This won't take more than half an hour.
Who's packing their suitcase?
So our other
That'll be
business,
on the 16th of November.
our other business item relates to the Suitcase project raised by Councillor Nicholson and also Councillor O'Neill as well.
Yeah, we're a team, arts and culture. He's arts and culture.
Passing those around.
Oh, Lord, help.
But not always the same. So at Arts and Culture last week, we had a presentation on the Suitcase project from Mr. Aliueva, who can do all things for all people. We found it really exciting. Actually, it was an item that was skipped on the Riverview Advisory Committee previous few days because we were too tight for time.
Also because they were waiting till after the presentation took place.
Okay, well, we're not waiting till after the presentation takes place. It's upcoming in the beginning of next week. And I'll hand it over to Ro.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, this is an information item, as mentioned by Councillor Nicholson, that was raised at the Arts and Culture Committee meeting just a few days ago. Just wanted to raise it with Council. Very interesting project. The city is working on a partnership with Riverview Hospital, Historical Society, and Douglas College to essentially display what we consider suitcase artifacts. The Suitcase project, and there's cards that are being distributed, which you've seen both the front and the back. I do have information on the screens. This is a collection of artifacts we received from Riverview Hospital when a collection agreement was signed between the Provincial Health Service and the City of Coquitlam. And the Suitcase project, is a collection of vintage suitcases, and there's 3 of them that contain personal effects of Riverview Hospital patients from the 20th century. The contents invite the exploration of patient circumstances, their personal experiences at the center, and their personal experiences with mental illness and hospitalization. It's a really interesting project. It certainly sparks conversation and discussion around asylum care, psychiatric treatment, mental health policies, etc. There is the suitcases will be displayed on loan at a conference on November the 5th, which is why we just want to raise it for information here for council. And there's a conference in Vancouver called, quote, After the Asylum, Legacies of Community Mental Health. These will be displayed with as well as posters of the information. Now, there's one of these for every suitcase, so there's 3 suitcases, but right now there's 2 that are going to be on loan, so we have 2 different cards. And it really just shows the the collection that we do have and really trying to raise and highlight the issue of mental health and the stigma of mental health and the history of mental health and the individuals that were in care in Riverview. And I will maybe read this out if I can, Mr. Chair, with your tolerance. Just there's individuals at the back who might not be able to read the screen. So this particular one is patient number 56839 in the East 4 wing. And there's some notes on the ward care. It says, quote, "This epileptic has led a secluded existence on a farm for many years under supervision. There has been increasing difficulty in her ability to get along, and she was referred to the clinic because of her fears that she was being poisoned. Shortly after admission, her brother, whom she alleged was beating her, was also admitted to the clinic and diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. In view of the fact that this woman requires close sympathetic supervision and none is available at the present time, we are admitting her to the Provincial Mental Hospital." We had a great discussion at the Arts and Culture Committee, really talked about some of the personal effects that you see in the suitcase and how close that brings mental health to all of us. Just looking at pocketbooks and hairbrushes and personal clothing. And so it's a very interesting piece, and we just wanted to bring that to committee for information and interest.
Where is it on display?
It's in Vancouver. It's a conference called, it's right in downtown Vancouver. It's Legacies of Community Mental Health is the conference. That's all I have.
They're looking for other opportunities to display
Yes.
in the community
Yes.
as well. I think one of the things we sort of realized at Arts and Culture as we were looking at these and talking about it was that the existence of the suitcase makes it fairly clear that she never went home.
That's correct.
We didn't exactly bring it because it was the most cheerful topic, but we thought it was fascinating.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. And we were all deeply touched by this at the Arts and Culture Committee. And on a personal level, and also just realizing how important this is to to our community and the history of our community. Riverview has played such a major part in our community. And there was expression about the, as Councillor Nicholson just said, about the desire to have these sorts of displays become more public in the community itself, not having it unveiled in Vancouver. Of course, we have no full-time real museum. Mac House is a wonderful little display. And that's something that the Arts, Culture, and Heritage community would really like to see. But in the interim, we also want to look for opportunities to display this in some of the public facilities we have now. And this, there is a library board meeting this Thursday. It's normally last week, but it was delayed because of, postponed because of conflicting arrangements. And so this would be discussed at the library board, because the library has display cases that it displays arts and crafts in, and perhaps this would be a really good display at the library, connected to all the archival material there that they have there, the history books about the area. It would be a natural. And there may well be other places in the city that this could be displayed, even here in City Hall. And we all from the Arts and Culture Committee would certainly support looking at those opportunities. And I think it would be a great benefit to all of Coquitlam to have this sort of thing on display. It's a great suitcase project. Small. It's not like it's a big piece of equipment coming out of Riverview that would be very difficult to put on display. This is something that's very portable, very small, and yet very evocative. Sometimes the smallest things can produce the greatest reaction. So, great project. Thank you.
So a couple of moments ago, someone said the smallest things produce the greatest reaction. Councillor Reid.
This is the kind of thing that I would like to send to Victoria, to the people making their solutions and their decisions about Riverview. And this makes these folks real. This is real. This isn't some number that somebody says, oh, we need funding for, or we need a piece of land, or we need a building. This is real. This could have been their grandmother. Maybe it was. So I would like to see these postcards go. We can send one a day, one a week, one a month, whatever. But I think this is the place for it. And if everyone else would agree, then maybe we could do that. Okay, we're done.
Three, that's three. Three.
Three is good.
And I mean, mental health, mental illness touches everybody, and we've all been touched. And I think there are real stories out there right now. And right now we have this wonderful thing that we ought to be celebrating. That Hillside, for example, is now occupied. It's the first time we've taken a building that had been closed and brought it back and reopened it. It won't happen that way with all of them, assuming that our vision moves forward in any direction, with any significance. In many cases, it'll be a new build, but it'll be on a site that has served the mentally ill for 100 years, and I think finally is starting to have some optimistic perspective that it can do that again. And I'm going to do it.
I think we're going to move adjournment.
Second?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Adjournment's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Take a 10-minute break.